that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine.
Hello everybody. Let's finish the fight. So, today for you, I have the second book in the Halo Forerunner trilogy by Greg Bear, Primordium. So, this is the Chakkas book. We were introduced to 4 characters really in the last book, Cryptum by Greg Bear, which was Born Stellar Makes Eternal Lasting, or Born Stellar for short, or if you want to go even shorter, Born. We were introduced to Chakkas and Riser. We got Chakkas, who's like the typical human like us, and then you got Riser, which was a different subspecies of human. And then we had the Didact, the Didact, the original, the main, the OG Didact, who is the antagonist of Halo 4. At the end of the last book, everybody kind of got separated. This entire book is from Chakkas's, basically, POV. And there's a lot of larger stuff around the galaxy going on, but we're not getting that. We're getting a very self-contained... I mean, there are big implications, there are big things we learn about, especially in the last, 100 pages of this book. Really fascinating and interesting things. But as to what's going on in the wider galaxy, we get little snippets, but we're not privy to the full story because it's just focusing on these humans on Zeta Halo. Yes, Zeta Halo. Installation 07. Installation 07 being the ring that Halo Infinite takes place on. And no, Halo Infinite does not make the ring as interesting as it certainly could have been, especially with the descriptions in this book. These long descriptions. It's probably the weakest of the trilogy. I don't think it's bad by any means because there's a lot of interesting and actually really well written and thought out portions of this book. But there's also literally, we walk from here to there. We eat this. We drink this water. We see some weird animal. And sometimes we get 50 pages of just that. And again, Greg Bear isn't much of a character, in-depth character person. So you're not getting these emotional moments to really bond with those. I mean, he does a little bit. But again, that's not his strength, at least what I've seen from Rogue Planet in the Star Wars Expanded Universe, and from what I saw from Cryptum. He does good, he can do good character stuff, but that's not his bread and butter. It's world building and big ideas and stuff. So there's a lot of that. It's just Chakkas with these humans, and they're walking around trying to figure things out, and it's really kind of boring. The backdrop is we actually see in present day, this is happening, I think, after Halo 4. You have a bunch of ONI members talking to a certain monitor who's talking about its past, supposedly. And this will be a big reveal at the end. Now, this is kind of, most people probably know this now if they get into the Halo EU. It's kind of become something that you kind of just get spoiled on. In case you don't know what I'm talking about, I will wait for spoilers. But as for what's going on with Born Stellar and the Didact, we don't know. We know nothing about what's going on with that. We don't know what's going on with the Master Builder, who we also got introduced to in the last book. We don't know exactly what the Librarian's doing. It's mainly just these humans on this ring. We do get some weird stuff with the Gios and how there's these ancient humans, these spirits of them living within their minds. So we have the Lord of Admirals, and the Lord of Admirals is inside Chakkas' head. And the Lord of Admirals is that Native American-looking man from the Halo 4 terminals that was fighting against the Didact and everything. So we got him in there. There's a lot of weird stuff going with that, but it's interesting and intriguing and all that. But the bread and butter of this book is probably the last 100 pages where the Didact comes back and we get introduced to this whole idea of this precursor race. These beings that existed before the Forerunners, that the Forerunners wiped out and supposedly created all life in the galaxy. Because the whole thing that Halo 4 goes on about, and this trilogy also goes on about, is inheriting the mantle, which is this mantle of responsibility that's been given to the Forerunners to preserve all life, including the Forerunners, but of course all life in the galaxy. They've been given that mantle. But according to the precursors, they failed to live to that mantle, so they were to be exterminated. But they exterminated the precursors. But in this series, we deal with the primordial, which is like this corrupted form of a precursor. We also deal with mendicant bias, which was created by the Master Builder, Forerunner, and the Didact. And the mendicant bias was interrogating the primordial for 40 years or so, and got corrupted, got the logic plague. Logic plague is a whole thing in the EU of Halo. You don't actually hear that term ever mentioned in Halo, the games, but you certainly do see it and the repercussions of it, like what's going on with Cortana at the end of Halo 2 to Halo 3. She's being slightly corrupted by the Grave Mind, because the Grave Mind doesn't only infect biological life, it can also infect AI. So it's a whole thing with that. But, so mendicant bias, this huge, powerful AI, and the primordial are doing a bunch of stuff. And I can't really tell you too much more. I'd say this book drags a lot. There is so much dragging in this second book that oftentimes it is extremely boring. And I'm not going to lie about that. At the same time, though, I get to learn a lot about Chakas. You know, it is quite sad if we see the turn of events for this character. And I won't get into spoilers, but this guy, you know, he started out as just some dude, took a job basically to help his family. And now there's these biblical, you know, crazy events that will mark the history of Halo. You know, before Halo even is a thing, you know, before the original game, we have all this history and lore going on. And this man simply went on a business gig with Riser and Bornsteller to make some money. And now all this stuff has happened to him, and more stuff will happen in the future, and his life is kind of over. Life as he knew it anyway. And originally he started this just to get some money. So it is quite crazy, the turn of events that Chakas has gone on. I will say, Chakas is heavily related to the games. It's a big revelation about this book. And I won't mention that here, although it's kind of obvious if you pay attention. But I won't spoil it here. But it was a good, not twist I'll say, but a good revelation. That was kind of hinted throughout. But overall, is it the best of the trilogy? No. I think Silentium probably has the best pacing because it's only like 299 pages. Cryptum's a bit slow in the beginning, but really picks up once the Didact shows up. And then this just has a lot of slog to get through. So, but that being said, there's still so many great moments in here, like especially near the end. Like that's just god tier. Like they have a whole conversation with the Primordial at one point, and that's beautiful. So it's more of a case of it is a rather slow burn, and it is the weakest of probably one of the best books that the Halo EU has ever done. Now this is coming from a guy that has not read everything in the Halo EU, but I'm going to tell you right now, this is probably one of the best trilogies you can ever read in the Halo expanded universe, bar none. It is absolutely essential reading, and it is some peak, not only Halo, but just peak sci-fi in general. It is really high bar up there, which is really surprising considering that Greg Bear's Rogue Planet kind of sucked. And I don't want to, I mean, I think he died last year, so I don't want to be like rude. Like I'm sure the guy is phenomenal. I've seen his, you know, Amazon page, and he has like hundreds of books. So this guy's popular, like bar none. Like this guy's got it. I'm just saying, like this second book did not land as well as I think those other two did from memory. But again, when it lands, it really, really lands. So I do recommend this book regardless. I mean, it's a part of the trilogy, so you should read it. But there's some amazing revelations throughout this. But I'm going to get into spoilers now. If you don't want that, time to bail. But definitely check out Halo Primordium. We have the Palace of Pain, which the Master Builder would experiment on a bunch of humans to try to figure out the Flood. He didn't. I already mentioned that they're on Zeta Halo, Installation 07, which is the Halo of Halo Infinite. The Lord of Admirals is in Chakas's head, as I also mentioned before. The slight thing we get on what's going on in the greater scheme of the main story and the wider galaxy is that Mendicant Bias has been attacking the Forerunners. But again, we're stuck on this Halo for the entire novel's runtime, so we don't exactly know what's going on. And the Precursor's Curse possibly created all life. We don't know if that's actually true, but that's what a lot of people believe. Chakas and Riser's spirits argue. Again, quite bizarre. Like, there's parts where the spirits just take full control of Chakas and Riser, and then they argue and debate things. But it's really interesting things that, the Lord of Admirals, and I forget the other guy's name, but the things that they discuss. So I did enjoy it. The Didact finally comes back, but he wants to save the Halo. He wants to help Chakas and figure this all out and stop this, da-da-da-da-da. And it's all very confusing, because the whole thing with, like, the Didact is he doesn't want to kill, or he doesn't want to use the Halos because it would destroy all life. He wants to, use these shield worlds where they can be protected from the flood. It's kind of like his whole thing, right? So why is the Didact doing this? What? That's so weird. What does this mean? It's the ISO Didact. And by that, if you remember in Cryptum, your Didact, the main Didact, the OG Didact, the Didact from Halo 4, imprinted stuff onto Bornstellar. Bornstellar is basically turning into a clone that it thinks independently from the main one, because of course he is a different person entirely, but there's enough of Didact's memories and emotions and personality imprinted onto Bornstellar that's kind of a mesh of the two. Hence, we have two Didacts, which is also, I think this is mainly meant to retcon some certain things, because Halo 3, we have some terminals you can find where you can read stuff about the Didact talking about his love for his wife and stuff, da-da-da-da. And some of that works with either Didact, but then there's also parts of it that just kind of contradict the motivation that the Didact has in Halo 4. It doesn't exactly line up. So this explains that there's two Didacts. My friend Marcel from, that does all of his narrations of the Star Wars Expanded Universe short stories, and of course has been doing an amazing book club on Supernatural Encounters by Joe Bongiorno of the Star Wars Expanded Universe fame. But he always makes jokes whenever there's a contradiction, whenever there's a problem. There's two of them. Well, how about 2 Luke Skywalkers? How about 5 Luke Skywalkers? There's 6 clones of Luke Skywalkers. Any contradiction, any problem, we'll just put another Skywalker in there, or another this or another that. But this is actually like a thing, though, in this book, is that there is Bornstellar makes Eternal Lasting, who's now the ISO Didact, and then there's the Your Didact, the Didact from Halo 4. So the ISO Didact is here to try to help preserve Halo, because that's what the Librarian also wants. This is the big thing. So Chakas gets messed with because they want to get the Lord of Admirals out of his head, but they do it very sloppily, very quickly. Chakas is dying. So the ISO Didact, who was originally Bornstellar and became friends with Chakas and Riser, tries to keep Chakas intact. So he transfers Chakas' mind into a Roomba. Chakas is 343 guilty Spork. Chakas is 343 guilty Spock. Monitor this installation. Quickly, Reclaimer. I do that pretty good. But 343 guilty Spock is Chakas. That is who he was originally, until he got turned into a robot. And then he becomes antagonistic in the Halo games. And then eventually gets redemption. But we haven't gotten there yet. So, this is the story of how a man who just went on a freelance gig turned into a Roomba for 1,000 years. 343, guilty Spock. But yeah, so that's the big kind of, again, it's hinted kind of throughout, but they make it affirmative here that guilty Spock is Chakas. So, we get this whole book dedicated to Chakas. We had the last book with him. And we follow this man. And again, it's not very exciting in the second book, but regardless, it's still such an amazing revelation that this ancient human existed for all these years and is a character that we've seen in the video games. Like, that's how you expand a universe. That's how you expand a character, right? Like, you read this book, you not only does it change your perception of Halo 4, it changes your perception of the entire original trilogy by Bungie. Because now, no matter how much you liked or hated 343 Guilty Spark, you go back and play those original games, and Guilty Spark means so much more to you now than he ever did before. And that's exactly what an expanded universe is meant to do. So that is incredible. And then the ISO Didact. I'm just going to call him the ISO Didact from now on because he's not really born stellar. And I'll say your Didact if I mean the one from Halo 4. You got that? Cool. I might have to reiterate this one more time for people that didn't watch this review, but only once in the next video. ISO Didact and Guilty Spark make their way and they talk to the Primordial, who also fittingly talks very much like the Gravemind in riddles. But essentially, he talks about, because the ISO Didact wants to understand, so humans can't get infected, they found a cure? No cure, only timing. The Flood is purposely not infecting humans. It's not their time. They have judged the Forerunners to be unworthy of the mantle. And so, they're going to purge them. They're going to bring unity to all. And they will test humans again in 1,000 centuries. And they will again see if they hold the right to uphold the mantle. And then they too will get infected. There's a lot of other things in that conversation, but that's kind of the big one. The Flood is seemingly endless. The Flood is seemingly unkillable, at least forever. And the Flood is seemingly eternal. They are beings that exist to figure out this mantle. But also, it's, again, there's so much I could talk about here. I really need to do like a book club or something with somebody else on this particular book in particular. There's a lot of interesting implications in the entire universe. But that entire conversation with the Primordial was superb. It was foreboding. It was a bit scary, even though it's just talking. But it's just kind of the implications of everything. And then the Primordial dies. But it's okay, because the Gravemind will live on. And we'll have the Primordial's memories, because every Gravemind builds upon the last. So, like the Gravemind you see in Halo 2 remembers that conversation in this book, because it's just accumulated memory of all past Graveminds. But overall, like I said, that's kind of the highlights of the whole book for me. There's a lot of drudging through it, though. It's definitely the weakest of the trilogy, but it's still a superb read. Greg Bear did a phenomenal job with this trilogy, and I'm excited to read the finale. Again, this hypens up and expands and makes better already existing lore that we have. So that's exactly what an expanded universe work is meant to do. Star Wars, Halo, doesn't matter. It's what it's meant to do. So really proud of this trilogy. It's probably one of the best things you're ever going to read if you get into the Halo books. But regardless, we'll see how we feel about Silentium when we get there. But this has my seal of approval. Till next time, guys, you just got to go through a lot of boring stuff to get to the really good stuff, and I'm sorry about that. Finish the fight. And the mission changes. It always does. And the next one will be Silentium. Till then, bye-bye.